The most difficult choice you will make in your life is what movie to watch tonight. That's why this week we're going to use this website to pick for us. Now, I've never used this website before, so I'm not sure if it picks from any movie on IMDb, any movie at all, or if there's some pre-computed subset of films. Either way, it should be a surprise to both of us. Now, if I've already seen the movie, or if I really cannot figure out how to find the movie, we'll have to pick another one. But otherwise, I'm going to reload the page. Deep breath, everybody. I'm going to click on this link, and let's see what we're doing this week. Jesus' Son. Allison McLean directs, starring Dennis Johnson, Elizabeth Cuthrell, David Arudia. I've never heard of this movie, and I've never heard of any of these people. Is this a religious film? Heroin addiction is one of the main themes in Jesus' Son. This isn't exactly a harrowing drug film like Requiem for a Dream, but it's definitely not a religious film. It's fairly edgy, or at least it's offbeat. When I glanced at this movie on IMDb a couple days ago, before getting a haircut, I actually skipped right over probably the biggest hint about what it would be like, which is that it came out in 1999. The late 90s and the early 2000s gave us a little moment of independent films in the mainstream. The best examples are things like Fight Club, American Beauty, American Psycho. These are Hollywood movies, but they have an independent spirit. And you know, the old mainstream formula is to be a little bit edgy, a little bit cool, but to ultimately retrench the mainstream values, bring the ship back into the harbor safely. Those movies, they don't really do the second part. In fact, to this day, they're controversial, they confuse people, they throw audiences for a loop. Jesus' Son is not as good as those movies, not as far out there in some ways, but it does have some of the same feeling, and it certainly has some stylistic similarities. We have a somewhat unreliable narrator. We jump around in time a bunch. We have a dynamic score that pushes the movie forward and uses some real songs. A cynic might say that the studio saw the success of something like Fight Club and wanted to capitalize it, wanted to replicate it. In fact, at a high level, Fight Club, the book by Chuck Palahniuk, seems fairly similar to Jesus' Son, the book by Dennis Johnson. But let's not be too cynical, because Fight Club and Jesus' Son actually came out basically at the same time, and in some ways aren't that similar. Most likely this movement was more complicated than one person copying another. It's probably too complex to tell the story in this video, and hey, maybe I just made the whole thing up anyway. Either way, for a random movie, we could have done a lot worse than Jesus' Son. This is a pretty okay movie. Now, as an offbeat and independent film, and I might add, as a Canadian film, there are some signs of poverty. In general, the acting is fine, but not great. This is fairly conspicuous since there's a voiceover that runs through most of the movie, and it's pretty colorful in its delivery. And at times, it works, and at times, it doesn't really. It's delivered by the main guy. We never quite learn his name. Bit like another movie, but he's played by Billy Crudup, who was in a few things at the time, but has been a little bit forgotten. I didn't remember him when I looked at the movie the other day. Samantha Morton is the other lead. Kind of similar story for her. If you're a big fan of the British panel show Would I Lie to You, she appears on that once, tells a story. Something to do with Tom Cruise, because she was in Minority Report playing one of the precogs, I think. Anyway, there are actually a few bigger actors in the film as well. Holly Hunter is here, but somewhat underutilized in a one-dimensional role. Dennis Hopper is in the movie as well, and Dennis Leary is here doing an impression of a younger Dennis Hopper, such as the one that appears in The American Friend. That's a great, great movie. Unfortunately, I didn't do a video about it. Anyway, Michael Shannon has a small role as well. You almost don't notice him. Jack Black has a fairly significant part. You definitely notice him. I've never been a big fan of Jack Black, but it's clear that he has a potent character and a very potent type of humor. And, well, when he shows up in this movie, he actually really swings things, and I don't think he fits here. He makes a big contribution, in fact, to one of the most serious flaws in the film. I say serious, I'm not sure how much it matters, but it's maybe the most egregious issue with Jesus' Son, and that's that it almost completely fails as a period piece. This movie is set in the 1970s, but you probably would not guess this if they didn't tell you. The movie has such a strong 90s look. I'm not sure how people working on the production could have missed this. I'm not sure how it could have been possible to overlook. Maybe it was intentional. This is just such a 90s movie. Now, there is a little bit of 70s fashion, but it looks like some 90s people wearing some old clothes trying to look cool. And believe me, there are all kinds of specific details that don't ring true, like Holly Hunter's hair or the sweatshirt that the main guy wears when he goes to Phoenix. But the biggest problem is it's a little bit harder to put your fingers on. The actors simply look like they are from the 90s, and they definitely talk like they are from the 90s. Jack Black is a huge offender here. I mean, you can imagine Jack Black showing up, basically playing himself and making all the jokes he makes in every other movie in a movie set in the 70s. It doesn't really work. The visual style is also a bit of a problem. It just looks like a 90s movie. Now, obviously, I watch a ton of movies from the 70s, and I'm pretty attuned to how those movies look and feel. And I'm not saying that a movie made in the 90s should look and feel like that. It's far from obvious what makes a good period piece, but this definitely isn't one. And honestly, they should have just changed the setting of the movie. They don't really engage with the period at all, besides showing us a Volkswagen Beetle and some pro-life protesters. Well, both of those things still exist today, don't they? Don't worry, I will take the bait on the religious elements of the film soon, but I want to complain a little bit more first about some basic things. I mentioned already that we have a non-linear narrative. The main guy is telling us some kind of story, although it doesn't really have a beginning, middle, or end, but I think that's okay. The movie is adapted from a collection of short stories, and it shows. Mostly, I think the structure works out. The jumps in time tend to feel fairly slick, but also oblique. It's a little hard to describe. Yes, it feels a little bit like a gimmick. It feels a little bit like, okay, I get it. It was 1999, but it more or less works. Often they cut away from things right before they get too on the nose, and it helps you get this sort of poetic, bare, short story kind of feel. Still, this might come with some costs. We don't quite develop the story as compellingly as a more traditional drama might. You might expect this to be a really gut-wrenching movie if you read the little blurb about the plot, but things are actually a little bit aloof. And that's probably part of the tone of the movie, but it contributes to a sense of that maybe the volume isn't quite turned all the way up in this one. And I think this is somewhat common for independent films in some ways. In a way, it is subtlety, and it's a good thing, but it also just feels slightly tentative. That said, there are a couple compelling moments in the film, and I like that the movie takes its time here and there. I appreciate that. My last potential complaint has to do with some of the puzzles you face when adapting something. I suspect that the movie takes a fair amount of text directly from the book. Voiceover is a common way for adaptations to grapple with a book that has a lot of nice words in it that would seemingly get deleted, disappear when you put stuff up on the screen. Maybe an ideal adaptation figures out a way to bring those words into the movie without them ever being spoken. I think this movie does a fine job of pulling from the book. I haven't read the book, so I don't know if it does it justice, but I can tell you if it makes a good movie. And yeah, kinda. I mentioned already that the voiceover is a little hit and miss. There are some nice moments here. There's definitely some good writing in the movie, but there also is some stuff that's too on the nose, some overt philosophizing. And yeah, it's couched inside of some indie hemming and hawing. It's not entirely on the nose, but it could have been edited a little bit more, I think. The movie, it mostly has the bareness of literature, but it teeters towards the saccharine or the pseudo-philosophical a few times. The plot is mostly a series of vignettes. This maybe lacks some narrative drive, like I mentioned, but I think they do about as well as they can here. And some of these vignettes are cool and not the type of things you would find in most movies. There's a lovely subplot where someone is ripping the wires out of a house to sell the copper for drug money. Turns out it's his own house, and that's by design. Anyway, I think I've complained enough at this point. Let's talk about some of the themes here. Honestly, there isn't that much that jumps out at me. Maybe this is part of this sort of tentative feel, but this isn't a movie that I have a sense that I really want to like dig deeply into. But there's some things. Religion is in the title, so we can talk about that. There are a couple of moments of religion in the film, actually. First, the main guy almost steals a guitar out of the back of a car, but he sees that there's a cross on the seat or something like that. I forget exactly, and he decides not to. Later, there's a moment where he's confronted by some Catholic protesters, and in the voiceover, he says something about the holy water splashing him, but he doesn't feel it. And finally, there's a moment where he's entranced by a Mennonite family that is sort of a pivotal thing in the movie in a rather abstract way. Now, obviously, this is not some straightforward story about coming to Jesus, but these moments are conspicuous. And it seems meaningful for this guy to encounter these religious moments. We also have the title. This comes from a song by the Velvet Underground, the song Heroin. To be Jesus' son is to transcend, but also to suffer, I guess, to be blessed and to be guilty, to be an addict with these highs and lows coming together. And this matches the tone of the movie completely. It's a good phrase. Not a huge fan of the Velvet Underground, but I can appreciate that song. And like I said, just that term, you can see why it was picked out of this song to be the title of a short story and ultimately a movie. We could read this religious stuff, I guess, more generally as a story about trying to make some meaning in life. And this is something that our guy struggles to do. In some ways, being high sharpens his senses and it opens up his mind, but it also isolates him from everyone but other users. Really, our story is about him meeting a string of people that he would probably never spend time with otherwise, building these connections with other junkies that are sort of, I don't know, fraught. There's a sort of camaraderie there, but not really. He's frozen out of society, which in some ways isn't a bad thing. I mean, an outsider sometimes has something to say, but yeah, I don't know. His life is not really his own. He verges on being this rebellious bohemian, but his life is not his own. This guy does not seem to be religious himself, but he is drawn to these religious elements a little bit maybe, or he's curious about them, or he pauses in front of them, maybe simply because it is a source of meaning for a lot of people. And that means something to him. And, you know, when I say meaning making, it might sound like it's some big philosophical aim, but really it's simpler than that. It's the process through which you have anything at all, I think. And this guy doesn't have much. When you look at the movie like this, maybe it makes sense that the drug moments aren't as harrowing as they could be. There's definitely some sad stuff in this movie and a couple intense scenes, but this isn't a movie about the horror of drugs. This isn't sort of this like tragic thing so much as it is a road movie about life, whatever the heck that means. So I don't have a lot more to say about Jesus' Son. Like I said, for a random movie, we could have done a lot worse. I wouldn't have watched this movie otherwise. It would have probably been filtered out of just in my process of the agonizing process of choosing what to watch tonight. And maybe that would have been correct, but I can get behind the movie. I think I can recommend it in general. I mentioned in the past I was thinking about a change of format for the channel. This isn't it. I just stumbled onto this idea randomly the other day, and I have no idea if I'll do this again. Maybe. If I do, I think I want to use a different method of getting a random movie. I suspect the website that I used is pulling from a subset of movies. We'll see. I don't think it's giving me quite as out there films as I would like. Ideally, if you select a random movie off IMDb, it should be something that you have no connections to. Not even Kevin Bacon knows someone who is in it. So we'll see. I might build my own tool for this. I think it might be cool to also reveal like one part of it at a time, like have it show you like who are the actors that are in it and then the year, and see if you can like guess it, the country, the languages, and things like that. I think that could be kind of a fun way to reveal what you're getting yourself into. But yeah, let me know if this was interesting, and if you've seen the movie. Yeah, let me know. Pretty good, but slightly too slight or something like that. I'm not sure.